Hello again, and welcome back to the GUADCAST. I'm PlaidPagan.
And I'm Moon Witch, known as Bex.
And this week we have something a little different that we wanted to do. We're going to do,
A top 10?
top 10-ish of early 2000s films, because as we've noticed, generally, that there's a lot of hate towards the early 2000s.
A lot of hate.
And I'm not really sure that's justified, really.
So the time, the dates that we're doing? 2000
Oh, yeah,
to...
so just to be clear, we're doing 2000 to 2009.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so... you want to...
So, I think maybe we should start with like a few honorable mentions, maybe? Stuff that was close?
Oh, yeah, we should.
Or do you want to do that at the end?
Well, do you want to talk about why we chose this era? I guess maybe because, like you said, it's kind of like an era where people are like, yeah, there's a lot of shitty movies that came out.
Yeah.
But...
like, at the same time, though, like, I feel like we were saying earlier, a lot of these films, specifically the top 5 that we picked, weren't necessarily just because they were good films. They were because they were films that had a strong effect.
Yeah, they specifically provoked a very strong emotional response from both of us. Yeah.
Even
if it was on different levels and it struck different chords with us, we were both like, okay, yeah, I'm feeling this shit.
and this project was actually a lot harder to put together than we thought. We thought it was going to be pretty easy. And then as we were making this, we're like, oh yeah, we'll do 10 and then we'll come together and like discuss the top 5 that we think. And we ended up having like 30 plus films on.
Yeah,
on
like
the
how
list.
we're like, we'll just pick 10 from this era that we like, but it'll take us like an hour or so to decide. It'll be so easy. And then like 2 days later, we're like, fuck, Beck, I narrowed it down to 30. And I'm like, bro, me too. It was definitely so much harder than I anticipated to pick even just a 10.
Yeah, it really was.
So,
I was really surprised that I thought for sure, I'm like, oh, this will be a piss easy list to make.
Yeah, because I was with you.
Sorry.
So no, fuck, I'm interrupting you.
I was gonna say, and as I was looking at it, I'm realizing that this cover is like all the Rob Zombie movies, Trick or Treat, 30 Days of Night, which I've reviewed on the show on my channel.
Yep.
And there's so many films plus the 5 that we're talking about.
Yeah.
They
were so that could kind of segue us into if you want to mention some of our honorable mentions.
Yeah.
Because we had a really hard time, even because our top 10, I mean, we had the same top, at least 5 of those films were the same in our top 10.
Yeah.
But they weren't necessarily our top 5, right? So there's a lot of debating about why would this be in our top 5. So maybe we can mention the other 5.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Well, actually, you go ahead, because I think, for the most part, we're pretty much on the same page with that. So, yeah, go ahead. Well,
there was one I think that we kind of end up bumping out last minute was The Others. I want to throw that one out there. The Others with Nicole Kidman. I am such a sucker for a haunted house movie, right?
Yeah.
So I love that slow burn gothic horror. I love that the idea of the movie is what you can't see is what actually scares you, because there's not a lot of ghostly encounters in the movie, but it's heavily implied.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say that would have been like my top 6, but we argued that we were gonna bump it from the top 5. So that's definitely one that I want to mention. And okay, you go next.
On that note of the unknown, that's kind of a theme for the top 5 even, because as we were talking about earlier, one of the films on that is more about what you don't see than what you do.
Yeah. That's what's so scary to me about that movie. I mean, like, I guess it's the Others has a few jump scares, and it has some of the music that's intense, but it's, like I said, you don't really see any ghosts. You don't really know what's going on until the very, very end. So it's just that eeriness. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree, yeah. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the gothic horror scene, genre, rather. And so there's a lot of, like, Woman in Black is one of my favorites. So The Others is, it's kind of that sort of, gothic horror flair, haunted house, kind of aristocratic looking family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to pick the next one, or you want me to do another one? No, you go.
I feel like some of the ones I want to talk about weren't actually on the top 10 for the two of us. Like Midnight...
No, we each had different top 10s, but we kind of collaborated to finally figure out a top 5. It just...
Oh, okay. Okay, so we can talk about different top 10s.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of mine was American Psycho.
Yeah.
Which I think is an excellent film. Specifically, it's one of those movies that people say is misogynistic, which I find strange since it's done by a woman. And it's just a parody of, like, you know, corporate lifestyle, basically. Like, you know, that this is the whole film is just this gigantic parody of his vanity and his narcissism. And I love that film. Like, I'm a big fan of Christian Bale in general, but just how crazy outlandish he is in that movie in particular is one of my favorite performances from him. That and, like, The Machinist, you know, are, like, two of his standout roles from him that I really like. But yeah, I think I wanted to... American Psycho would have made, like, my top 5, except the fact that, like, it didn't have an effect on me in the sense that, like, the other ones we were talking about, that we're going to talk about.
Right.
I really liked this movie. I love this film, but it didn't affect me on a psychological or emotional level like the other 5.
Right. The American Psycho 2, I guess it's kind of a horror movie, maybe more of a thriller, but it's a lot of fun to watch, right? Yeah. Where you're saying it doesn't really make you feel, like, alone or sad or eerie or any sense of dread or intensity like most atmospheric horrors would. But it's a lot of fun to watch because he's a psycho and he's, like, chasing the bitch and, like, trying to kill her. I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a parody in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's why I think it's okay to have a laugh at it.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say my next one that made my top 10, we talked about this a lot, but because there's a lot of controversy because it's so different from the video games, the Silent Hill movie.
Oh, yeah.
I love Silent Hill,
yeah.
and I think it's creepy. I really do. Yeah. So do you get that from Silent Hill at all?
I like Silent Hill a lot. I'm a big fan of the franchise in general.
Like the video games?
Yeah, and the film. Well, the one film. The second film just bugs me. I don't mind, like, Revelation. I think, it's Revelation.
Yeah.
I don't like Revelations at all. That movie just pisses me off on so many levels. But the first Silent Hill doesn't bother me. I like it.
And I think as a movie that's completely separate from a video game, even though I think a lot of people were expecting a video game experience from the movie, which is why a lot of people didn't take it well. I think it actually did pretty well as a standalone movie, though. It's super creepy, especially with the two realms of living and the dead merging at one point. Like that I love that kind of shit too. It's so neat, and you see all the kind of monsters that come out of the dark, and I love that. I think it's really cool. Like Pyramid Head is such a fucking badass, and you love that scene with him on the church stairs. I know you do. I know you do.
He just skins the bitch and chucks the fucking skin at the church door. I love that shit.
Yeah, there's some really cool graphic violence in it.
The violence is superb in Silent Hill. What I do like about Silent Hill, even though a lot of people shit on it because it's not the same as the game, but it knows that it's not the game, and it pays a lot of fan service and nods to the game franchise, which I think is something that Resident Evil is lacking. I feel like I like Resident Evil, the first one anyway, but it's so different, and that's not in this era, I don't think. But Resident Evil had the same kind of issues. People complained that it wasn't like the games. But in the case of Silent Hill, I think it actually works out better for it because of that. Plus, the game's subject matter is so psychologically convoluted that it's really hard to put that onto film. Specifically because there's multiple endings in the games, each one, so it'd be a very difficult story to tackle.
I agree, and I also think something like Silent Hill 2 is very much about the experience of the game and the scares of the game. Yeah. So it's really hard to put that into a movie format, right? When you're not experiencing it, the way that you would maneuver throughout Silent Hill as a player, right? So I can kind of see how that's a little bit disconnected from the movie and the video game. But I still think the movie itself has some awesome monster scenes. Those freaking creepy... I don't even know how to describe what they are. And, like, I think it's pretty infamous to say, like, the nurses are pretty sick.
Yeah.
I like the nurses, too.
Yeah, Pyramid Head is the big one for everybody with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, the monsters in Silent Hill, even the games, they're difficult to describe.
And I like that.
Yeah, they're almost Lovecraftian in that sense. Like they're very just pieces of meat, essentially.
Yeah.
Speaking of meat, my next one is Midnight Meat Train, based on the short story by Clive Barker, of course. This is one that I don't hear a lot about when people think about this era. They don't really talk about this movie. And again, this movie didn't make my top 5 because it's a lot of fun. I love this movie, and it's very good. It did not affect me on that same level that the top 5 did. Mm-hmm. Now, so, just how it's kind of like. It's very Lovecraftian, like in a way that it's like this kind of this kind of investigation into this really strange situation, and then it just devolves into. I mean, without really getting into too many spoilers, it kind of devolves into this much deeper plot than it seems. Like on the surface, it just seems like he's chasing this serial killer, but then when you find out like who the serial killer is kind of working for ish, and like what's actually going on, where the midnight train goes, and you start to find out all these other things that come into play. It's a very I don't even know how to describe it. It's a fucking awesome movie. I love Midnight Meat Train. I think like my only complaint about Midnight Meat Train is the fact that the CGI gore is a bit obnoxious.
A little bit shitty?
Yeah, he like bashes the guy's head with a meat tenderizer, and like the CGI eyeball pops out. And like I don't get why like the 2000s loved its CGI gore, and I don't know.
Well, because we had so what I mean, because we had something like the 80s where there were so much like makeup effects for the gore. Like you look at something like the slashers, like my favorite Freddy, and there's just fucking blood spray and you know, and then you get like that, and then it transitions into the fucking 2000s where they get all the gore is CGI, so you really lose like that realistic element, right? So
like thankfully it's gone back to a lot of it's more practical now, like Terrifier. And shit like that,
but maybe that's why a lot of people have issues with the 2000s, because we go from the 80s where there's so much slasher movies, right? And lots of gore and lots of good gore, and then to like really shitty gore, right?
Well, I mean, the 90s is in between the 80s and 2000s there.
What did I say?
You said 80s and 90s, or you said 80s, and then we go into the 2000s, and like...
Am I high?
No. Yeah, kind of missed a whole decade in the middle.
Well, yeah, okay. So, okay, anyways.
I get what you meant, though.
Okay, good, because I don't even remember what I said. Yeah. Do we want to pick another film? I could probably pick one more that I wanted to kind of mention.
Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll jump into the...
I was going to say Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
I really, really like Trick or Treat. I love how there's a whole bunch of little stories going on. Okay, also because it's a Halloween movie and it's fucking dope.
Yeah.
But I love how there's like a whole bunch of little stories going on, and you're not quite sure how they're connected until the very end, right? And like possibly the cutest slasher serial killer ever is Sam, the little guy.
Pumpkin demon thing.
And I love like he's carrying his trick or treat bag down the stairs, and you like hear like a thud thud. He's like carrying his dirty sack. Anyways, like that's like just superficial things I like about the film, but I just thought it was an awesome film. But again, like we mentioned with even American Psycho, although the two aren't exactly comparable in that regard, but it's another one of those fun films that you don't like get anything serious from it. You're not like, oh my god, I'm so scared. It's just like, hey, that was fucking sick. You know, I watch it every Halloween. You know,
So it's basically that movie's just like a celebration of the holiday.
Yeah,
right?
and I love that. It's so cool because like you and we love Halloween. So like I have an appreciation for this film, which I'm sure a lot of horror fans do, right? Yeah. But yeah, so it wasn't exactly like scary or, you know, emotional or anything. It was just fucking sick. Yeah.
And I think that the other point that we want to make is that some of the films that we didn't talk about today or aren't going to talk about today aren't bad films. The films that we love. In a lot of cases, we want to talk about them in a separate episode. Like we were talking about like the Rob Zombie films, doing them in a separate episode.
Yeah.
And some other things like Saw and Hostel and those like a torture porn type stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like there's certain things that we want to talk about, but we want to keep the time frame of the show in a relatively manageable. I mean, we could sit here for 4 hours talking about the fucking 2000s.
And everyone would be like, please shut the fuck up.
Yeah. So
I can't.
So dividing it up and kind of like talking about Trick or Treat with like Krampus and like other like campy holiday horror movies.
Yeah. So as much as they deserve time, we'll do it later on, I think, right? That's why we kind of want to like throw some honorable mentions. Like, hey, like we don't want to like diss anyone's favorite film in case we don't mention it, because there is actually a lot of good films that we found from this era.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I was super surprised. Yeah. And so those ones definitely. I would say like maybe one more, like The Cell. Remember The Cell with Jennifer Lopez? Mm-hmm. And I thought that was another
Triangle. I love Triangle.
Yeah, and I thought those were good movies. I like the idea of the cell and like the really like creepy, disturbing scenes we see when she's inside the.
Is so good in that movie.
Yeah, like the one, like my favorite scene is the one where he's like sitting in his throne and like his cape is like stuck to the wall, and as he gets up and moves, his fucking cape moves from the wall. Like, yo, it's so cool, right? There's a lot of really neat things in The Cell. But I remember bringing it up to you before, and you thought maybe, and I agree that maybe it's more like a crime thriller, right? I don't know. So there's always that fine line that we're trying to.
Horror rubs genres so much. It's hard sometimes to
even with like sci-fi.
To really define, because we were talking about Pitch Black even.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to define where it falls in a category, and this is a common thing that's talked about a lot in the horror community. Is like, where some of these films fall, like is it a horror movie or isn't it? Like, but in the case of in the case of The Cell, like I feel like that movie's pretty creepy in a lot of ways. Like, for me, like I like this. For me, the scene where he is like pulling his intestines. Oops. Fuck me. Where he's pulling his...
Speaking of pulling his intestines.
Yeah, no shit. Where he's like pulling the intestine out on the spiky fucking...
he's like...
And he's the jester and he's like mocking him.
Yeah.
That scene's intense. And then
he like fishes in his belly button.
And the child abuse and stuff is rough too. Like, but that's it. That's an excellent film as well. Deals with some pretty heavy subject matter.
And this is why we had such a hard time defining, okay, what is horror? And that's why we said, okay, perhaps for us personally, we'll pick the 5 movies that had the most profound effect on us, be it like a provocative emotional response, or like some kind of psychological fucky that we had.
Yeah.
So like, for lack of a better term.
and we, like, you were a young teen, and I was like 14, 15 when these movies were a thing, right? Mm. You know, so like that's part of it too. It was like our influential era for like when our creativity really started. Yeah. So these films kind of affected a lot of the way that we look at our own work.
And I think that's why when we went back through to try and pick out films, we kept saying, oh my God, I remember this from my childhood. And I actually really enjoyed this film, you know? Yeah. And so it was so hard for us. However, we should swing into our top 5.
The top 5.
Want to go into it?
Okay. Do you want to start off? Because
Sure. Okay. Our number.
Do you remember the order we picked?
Yeah, I remember the order.
Okay.
Do you remember?
Because I know we talked about it for a while to put them in the order.
And we kept like moving them around, and we're like, it's so hard to, because we're not actually really ranking them, but we're trying to.
Yeah.
So out of our top 5, I would say our number 5 was The Descent. Yeah, it was The Descent.
Was The Descent, yeah.
It's like this huge buildup. It was.
Fuck, what was it again? It was The Descent, yeah. Yeah,
it was The Descent. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Okay, so I think some of the obvious horror with this one, I mean, like, it's in a fucking cave. The whole movie is really dark. The only, like, kind of lightness you see is when they have their, what the fuck are those things called?
Flashlight?
No, they had like a shit. Yeah, okay.
The glow sticks.
Flashlight, you dumbass. Glow sticks, that's what I'm thinking of.
Glow sticks. I don't know what the fuck. They crack them and they toss them.
Yeah, they shake them.
They have flares too? No, the shaky things.
They did,
I don't know what the fuck they're called.
Yeah,
Do I look like I fucking spelunk? Look at me.
They're called the shaky things. But I love how the movie, like, and expectedly so, is very, very dark. I'm trying to, like, get serious again, even though, like, I want to Google, you go, it's so fucking dark. Because obviously it's in a cave, it's underground, it should be dark. And I like how the only times you really see the light is the very dim light of the glow sticks.
The jerky off thing?
And the blood, like you see the blood, right?
Yeah.
One of like the really epic scenes is when she fucking goes in the pool of blood, and then she just comes out, like she emerges like this, opens her eyes, and like she's covered in blood, and like she just like descended into full madness. Like talk about the descent. This bitch descended.
Yeah, you know? Like really, yeah.
Yeah, and she was just like completely 180 of a character, right?
Yeah, well, that's kind of like, I think the movie, other than being incredibly uncomfortable, like this movie.
Oh yeah.
Even though like it's gory, but that's not the parts that I walk away from, or I cringe away from. But that scene where she's crawling through and she gets stuck and then it starts to collapse. That scene, I'm claustrophobic. That scene, like, stresses me. It gives me anxiety while I'm watching it. Because it just, I can, if I was in that position, I would shit myself. Like, there's no way, first of all.
Well, what the fuck do you do,
You wouldn't catch my fucking ass in a cave, period. Like when we were kids, we used to go up to Collingwood in up in Ontario, and holy fuck. Like, those little cracks made me, those fucking things made me uncomfortable. So, like, this movie is just my nightmare in a lot of ways.
It's funny, because I'm not claustrophobic at all. But this movie made me feel claustrophobic watching it. And I felt uncomfortable. Like, well, I was really surprised at it. Especially when I decided to rewatch it, because I hadn't seen it for so many years. And I just remember this, like, awesome British flick where, like, fucking, like, spoilers, like, everyone dies at the end. I'm like, that sounds pretty cool.
Depending on the ending. Depending on if you see the real ending or the shit one that they made just so they could get the sequel out there.
Right, okay,
which is
true.
The sequel's not that bad. It's just not as good as... It's okay.
Because honestly, I don't even remember the sequel. Like, I know I've seen it, but I don't actually remember it. Anyways, fuck the sequel. Well, you're speaking of claustrophobia, and the way the director uses the camera, like everything you notice, like all the scenes, all the angles, everything's very tight. Mm-hmm. Everything's very tight on all of the subjects, like all of the women, right?
Yeah.
And it gives you that sense, like you never see like big open cave space. I think you see it at the very beginning before they go off in their tunnel, and you see it when she's in the room with all like the corpses in the big blood pool, and that's really it. You just have these like 2-3 shots of open spaces. Everything else, the camera even feels claustrophobic. It's really tight shots, right?
Yeah.
And that's what made me feel like, fuck, I feel like I'm in this cave. Like you're just like squirming for breath. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Based off our previous podcast, it's kind of like expected that we will talk about spoilers. I know we kind of already gave one away.
We should have said at the beginning. I got a big mouth.
Yeah, just so like you know, it's kind of just a basic principle moving forward for our show that we're going to just talk about the fucking movie.
We're just going to spoil everything.
Yeah, I mean, these are the movies from the 2000s, and I think for the most part, these are pretty popular ones, like the ones we're talking about. So
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think most people I've talked to have seen these films at least.
Okay,
once.
cool.
Yeah. So yeah, The Descent is one I've seen brought up a few times actually because it makes what's great about The Descent is it's that scene you were talking about where she comes out from the blood.
Yeah, like, the blood pool.
Yeah, like this movie in a lot of ways to me was kind of like the way you feel about like Pretty Thing being like a feminist movie. It's kind of how I feel about The Descent. I think it's very much about like her finding herself after these horrible tragedy, like her husband's having the affair.
Yeah, and with one of the women she's in the cave with.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like her recovery to this. I think like the blood scene specifically is like her ascension out of the trauma that she's experienced, and that's kind of what the symbolism is. And even the whole, kind of depending on which ending you get, the one that I prefer, it's kind of almost too late in a way. Like she finds herself, and then she ends up getting stuck in the cave anyway. Mm-hmm. And then like it ends with her having that like birthday party with her daughter, and she's still in the cave. She thinks she gets out, but she's still in the cave, right? Yeah,
so. Yeah. I like how, because then again it shows her like back and they're screaming, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because isn't there the idea? I mean, I've never done cave exploring, and maybe I'm getting off topic, but don't you like lose a certain amount of oxygen when you're down there for so long? It can cause hallucinations.
I think that's kind of a general thing. I don't mean I'm not a scientist, but I think
neither am I.
It's kind of a thing in like The Abyss and a couple other movies like that where you're like being away from the sunlight and the steady stream of oxygen starts to fuck up your psyche. Mm-hmm. Some people, like, I mean, remember in like The Abyss, Buddy's like starts cutting his arm all to shit and like tries to blow up the aliens and everything. So.
One of the things we didn't even mention in The Descent is the monsters. So,
right, yeah.
Right, so what we know that women are being hunted, and I think one of the really cool twists about this is that it's a group of women that are, you know, seemingly, like, pretty good friends, experienced cave divers. Not only are they being hunted by monsters, then they all start to fucking turn on each other, right? Yeah. So you got two things going on. It's like human versus human and human versus monster, right? So
especially at the scene where she kills her friend by accident and then like covers it up, or she thinks she kills her, so she like covers it up, and then the other lady finds a. I can never remember the names of all these women. Like,
I know. But they're all fantastic actors.
Once they're in the cave, I have a hard time just figuring out who's who. Because they've all got all the gear on, and you get like all these weird angles.
And the movie goes so fast. It's such an adrenaline movie, right? Just pop, pop, pop. So yeah, you're right. So sorry, I want to jump back to that. She kills one of the friends by accident, and then the one that gets like the one that like eventually, you know, we think survives in the end. Yeah. She finds out that the woman was having an affair with her husband. Like the most savage thing. What does she do? She doesn't kill the bitch. What does she do? She fucking like disables her and leaves her for dead.
Yeah.
But I was like, whoa, that is savage. That is cruel, because she doesn't just like get revenge and say, hey, I'm killing you. I'm gonna leave you to these motherfuckers that are gonna eat you and
like
enjoy.
Rip you to pieces.
Yeah. That was fucked up. I was like, that is horrifying.
Yeah, that's a solid way to get revenge on somebody you didn't like.
Yeah,
especially when you find out something like that, like your dead husband was fucking this chick this whole time.
I know, and you see your husband and your kid die in front of you, and then the woman that's supposed to be your best friend like takes off, and she's not there for you during that. Yeah. So the whole dynamic of the women's relationship is quite stunning throughout the film, right? They all kind of like deceive each other, turn on each other, especially when they find out the one led them into an unmarked cave, and it's quite horrifying, the whole thing. And
the movie in general, I think like that's why it's on this list, is because the claustrophobia is so difficult for me to watch. Yeah, like I have a hard time watching it. It's like cringe-inducing, and I don't use that cringe-worthy lightly. It's like, oh, it's cringe. Like this is like literally, I'm like, I can't watch it because it's so the claustrophobia is just too much. And like, even the gore is great in this movie. Like, and
the bloodbath,
and the feelings that it evokes in you of like the frustration and the anger. Like I feel pissed off that this woman is being such a twat to them. Meanwhile, she's the one that's like responsible for getting them stuck there. She's responsible for not responsible.
Well, she's so arrogant.
Yeah, and you know, and then she's fucking the chick's dead husband.
The funniest thing about that is she's the character you want to hate the most in the movie, but she's the badass one. She's fucking like taking on 3 of these monsters at a time, right? Yeah. So she's actually getting shit done. Yeah. So it's just it makes it hard to hate her, because like, yo, this woman can really slay monsters, right? But I mean, she really got what she deserved. I thought
kind of that role reversal at the end there, where the one that seems all like timid and shy and scared is the one who ends up being the fucking
her own descent into madness. Yeah. Okay, so do you want to introduce the next one, number 4?
Yeah, I guess this is one that we all watched as kids. I remember we watched this with Mom, and this is one. I think we had some of my friends over. I was like, what, 14 when this movie came out?
I remember having one of my friends over too.
Yeah, or at least when we rented it for the first time.
Yeah.
Because we weren't like theater people, but we did often.
We liked our home theaters.
Yeah, we would do like Friday night. We'd rent like 3 or 4 scary movies and watch them as a family. Yeah, I remember that. So this one, The Ring, and this movie, the American remake.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we didn't watch the Japanese one when we were kids. I didn't watch that until I was an adult.
Yeah, same.
I appreciate, but they're very different in a lot of ways. Yeah. And The Ring, the American version, fucked me up in a lot of ways. Like, and coming back and watching it as an adult, I really realized the level of dread and dreariness and, like, almost like like existential dread, in a way. That about this thing that she has no idea how to solve, and it's just super creepy, and she's trying to figure out how all these things link together, like and then goes on this kind of
like goose hunt or
like a wild goose chase to like basic these little tiny pieces of evidence. Like she sees
very obscure.
Yeah, the lighthouse in the footage. Yeah. And she goes to this island looking for it. Yeah. Yeah. But I think for me, like, The Ring the creepy, like the tape itself is kind of like an indie art horror thing, right? So it's just and it feels so weird and uncomfortable.
I really like the filming style of The Ring. Like everything kind of feels grainy, like almost like TV, like a grainy static of the TV. And everything's got that kind of gray scale and like blue scale, right? And I really like that because if you think about The Ring, a lot of movies in this era that we've talked about before and we'll talk about are typically like a psychological kind of horror. The Ring in some kind of fun way is like a technological horror because it relies on the VHS, a TV, and a phone, right? So it's kind of, it was, for us, it was new, like growing up, we didn't have much technology in our household. The bit that we did have was probably a phone and a TV and like one shared computer kind of idea.
Yeah, dial-up internet.
Yeah, so for us, like the technology was so new to us at this time when we were watching The Ring. We're like, fuck, like this is terrifying, right? I was like, this bitch gonna come through my TV, like.
And the whole like phone call, I remember we used to like troll each other with that as kids. So we would call each other and do the fucking voice. 7 days. I remember.
And then I used to also do the.
Yeah, but I was gonna say you used to do
the grudge.
The grudge thing.
I used to love doing that. Oh my goodness.
You just call people up and do that shit.
Yeah. I was a sick kid.
You're a little fucking asshole.
Sick fuck. But okay, so getting back to The Ring. So and never mind me being such an asshole. The one thing I really liked about The Ring 2 was its score.
So Ring 2? Or Ring
that I also liked about The Ring.
Okay, I'm like, I don't want to talk about that piece of shit sequel.
There's no sequel, no. But I really liked the score and how they used that, like, gloomy Seattle rain. Everything was like an ambient sound. It was like the wind whistling and a static. I really liked that kind of background music they chose for it.
Yeah, because it's not really music. It's more like noise, kind of. I mean, I guess that's technically.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah.
I like that quite a bit. And I also liked the fact that the whole movie, I mentioned this before, because I kind of related it to Pretty Thing. Where it's like, we know she's gonna die because she watched the videotape. We know the woman's gonna die because she said, I won't live. Like in Pretty Things, she's like, I won't live to be 29 or whatever. So the movie kind of, like, again, is building that dread, that intensity towards her death. But only with The Ring, I felt more like it was like a creepy crawl towards her death. Right? Like it was really eerie in a different way than Pretty Thing was.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it just feels like it's, I mean, in a way, like, it literally feels like Samara is, like, creepy crawling, all twitchy.
Exactly, like the...
Yeah, towards you, yeah.
Yeah, I really liked that kind of countdown, the 7-day countdown. It was neat. So again, like, I guess it would kind of build that intensity and that dread, and you're waiting, like, oh, does she solve the puzzle? Does she save her life, you know? And so in the end, we think that she does when, you know, the TV knocks her in the well and she, you know, like, luckily doesn't smash her skull on the well on the way down. She makes it safely into the pool unharmed. You know, good for her.
I'm like, how the fuck is that even, like, that's like one of the, I mean, all the supernatural shit's going on and, like, that's the part that's unbelievable to me. Like,
yeah, I know.
Like,
especially when the TV.
Break her neck?
You remember those old TVs? So they were huge and heavy. Like, you could, like, crush yourself holding that.
I got one downstairs. I got a CRT downstairs.
Yeah. They're fucking huge TVs, and it knocks her down a well. So, anyways, what I like about that is you think that she solved the puzzle, right? And you're like, oh, I set her beautiful soul free. And then her little son's like, you helped her. Because we all love the creepy kids, right? Like, why'd you do that, mother?
That kid bugs me so fucking much, though. Like,
he's an edgelord at, like,
I
9.
just don't like that actor, the kid. Not the actor. I mean, I don't mean to shit on
the character. The character, yeah.
I just don't like him.
Well, like, I think the kid was, like, obviously intuitive. He was sensitive to it.
I think they just made him creepy just to make him creepy.
They did. Yeah, that was, like, the one part where, like, I wouldn't rank The Ring any higher because some of those, like, cliche Hollywood things kind of came through with The Ring, right? Yeah. Even though The Ring, I felt like, as a kid, too, I felt really creeped out by it. And the fucking, like, the Japanese style with the long, wet hair, like, I got long hair, you know, I was like, Mom, should I shave my head? So I think that was fun for me as a kid, you know, like, you know, the shower. That's the oh, wait, it's just me back here. Anyways, what would you like to say?
I had the same reaction. reaction, but it's just because I'm a fat white guy. But
Huge.
The thing for me about the ring is you can't beat the creature, the entity, the Samara. You can't beat her.
Evil prevails.
Yeah, like just you don't.
And I like that. It's like
you can't destroy it. You can dodge it by recreating it and spreading her curse essentially. Yeah, so like you can spread the curse, but she can't be beaten, which I think is what makes her so menacing and terrifying. Is that you can't stop her. And
that's why I think a lot of people shit on the ending because they're like, oh, I thought it was going to end when she took the bitch out of the well, and then all of a sudden, plot twist, you helped her, you freed her.
Yeah.
I actually like the twist because then at the end of the movie, not only is this awesome, amazing scene where Samara crawls out of the TV and kills the guy, and she twitches, like a TV fragment. It's really cool. The effects are actually pretty sick, right?
Yeah.
And she comes out looking like a grainy TV person. Like she doesn't come out looking like, hey, I'm fresh, you know. And I really liked that. And then the very end, that was a cool scene, right? At least I think so. And the very end, though, I like you were saying, you can't kill her. She can't be beaten. The menacing evil will continue to spread. What does the mother and son do? Well, they have to make a copy of the videotape, spread it. Not only do they have to make a copy, they have to show it to somebody. Mm-hmm. So their survival depends on
condemning someone else.
Yeah, the expense of others' lives, right? So it's the idea is such a vicious circle.
Yeah. So. Yeah, definitely. And I think what works well in that movie, too, is how it does its jump scares, which aren't obnoxious, right? Because Samara will make a kill, but you don't see what happens. And then randomly later, someone will be talking about it, and then it jumps, like, with the mother, and then she makes a comment about, like, I saw her face or whatever, and then it does that clip to the face.
Yeah.
And... So,
yeah, I like that. Oh my god, the deaths are cool. Like how they instantly decompose, like how she would have decomposed in the well, right? That's pretty neat too.
But like it just jumps to them randomly when you're not expecting. Like she comes out of the well or whatever the fucking TV, whatever the bitch does, and she comes after them, and then they die, and you kind of just see like the zoom in on their face, like as she's looking at them or whatever, and then it cuts, and then later they'll be talking about it, and then you see it. Like, it cuts back randomly and shows the face and then cuts back to the scene. Which I think is way more effective because you're kind of not expecting it, right? Because you're like, oh, the death already happened. And then just cuts right to it and cuts back. Yeah.
And that's kind of like the whole idea of the use of imagery in the ring being very, very strong. Like it's specifically like when you mentioned, when we talked before about the videotape. The videotape is horrifying because there's so many disturbing random images which eventually make sense about Samara and her like backstory, right? But it's just like to see the videotape just by chance, like what the fuck did I just watch? It is disturbing in that sense,
it's like
right?
a weird indie thing,
Yeah, so the imagery is quite effective. I really liked it. So why don't we stop talking about the ring? Because I could just keep going on. I don't know why.
I could talk for hours about most of these movies.
The ring is just a childhood thing. But I don't want to rant about the ring too much. Because a lot of people hate it. I like it. I mean,
a lot of people hate this era.
Yeah, it's true.
This is kind of we talked a lot about this before we decided to do it because we're pretty sure some people were gonna shit on us for it.
Yeah. But. So do you want to start number 3 or do you want me to go?
I said the ring.
Oh yeah, we're jumping back and forth. All right.
I mean, might as well. And then we'll both reveal 5.
Oh, number 1.
Yeah, well, it's whatever, you know what I meant. I haven't even had anything to drink yet. Fuck me, I don't even know.
Okay, so number 3, 28 days later.
One of my favorite, my favorite zombie movie. Period. Like, even though it's not really a zombie movie, it's like my favorite.
So because I didn't watch it, or I haven't seen it in years and years and years, right? Mm. So I didn't quite remember it, admittedly, but I remembered it as a zombie movie, right? And even though it's not, I wouldn't say it's actually a zombie movie.
Yeah.
That's how I remembered it, and when I rewatched it, I was like, oh fuck, man, fuck, bud, like, fuck, buddy, fuck, buddy. I actually, you know what I mean, eh? I totally forgot how fucking sick this movie is.
Yeah.
And I told you when I was rewatching it, I was like texting you, I was like, bro, because the fucking opening scenes, and we talked about how this movie really affected us emotionally, how, besides the opening scenes of, like, the poor monkeys that are infected and the monkeys. Anyways.
Yeah, I got issues with Animal Cruelty.
I know, I couldn't watch it. When the movie opens up, he wakes up in the bed in the hospital, and, like, the world around him has gone to absolute shit, and he wakes up in a post-apocalyptic society. He's like, what the fuck just happened? Like, can you imagine waking up to that and being like, your fucking parents are dead, my parents are dead, and everything is just completely changed? That's terrifying, right?
Yeah, like, as I said, like, the whole idea of, like, everything you know is just gone. You go to sleep.
Like, overnight.
And you wake up, and...
Well, for him, it's 28 days later. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean, but, like, he was asleep. He was in a coma, where I don't even remember exactly. It doesn't really say. It's just that he's out for that whole time, and then he wakes up, and all this shit has gone to hell, and he has no idea. I mean, Walking Dead opens the same way, but Walking Dead was after this. I'm not sure where the comic falls into this, but I know, like, film-wise, that 28 Days Later was first. I feel like the Walking Dead comic came out after 28 Days, like, right around the same time.
I don't know, to be honest.
I'm not a big Walking Dead fan, so, like...
Neither am I.
Yeah.
I was really into zombies beforehand, and I didn't mind the first few seasons of The Walking Dead. But anyways, it was hard to keep up with the show, I find. However, 28 Days, though, I like how it does that post-apocalyptic feeling, right? And this is what I told you. When he woke up, when the main character wakes up in the bed, he's out on the streets of London. And we all know London is a huge urban city, completely empty, and it's eerie.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of these really beautiful shots that the director gives us of these big wide open scenes of empty London, and there's like one little guy that looks like a tiny rat in the streets just wandering around, like calling out to people. Like, could you imagine being in his shoes? Like, where the fuck is everyone? Like, what the hell happened? That's, like, to me, that's a pretty terrifying notion. It's
absolutely.
Like, I've had nightmares with things like that before, you know?
Yeah, it's just it's not just, and it's not just the zombies in this one, right? It's more the feeling of, like, the
fear
isolation.
of the unknown. And...
Yeah, like, he has no idea what's going on. He's completely isolated. He's trying to figure it out. He's, like, walking around trying to piece together. So he goes to places that he knows, his parents' house. He goes to a church, you know, and these kind of things. And you know, then when he gets to the church, that's when he discovers the zombies, right?
Yeah, there's that really, like, graphic scene of the pile of dead infected people.
Yeah, and they're all hiding on the church, right? Because generally in movies like this, they always kind of depict these horrible situations and people flock to churches or wherever their religious gathering place is.
Right,
whatever. That's their comfort or whatever. So that's kind of that imagery there, and it is just how symbolic that is of, like, you know, still they got wiped out. But it's something, but the movie is so...
lonely and sad.
It's a lonely, sad movie. Like, I feel sad watching it. Like,
and in the first part of the movie, before they get to, like, that sort of rogue army base, it seems, I told you this, it seemed a little sci-fi to me, because the feeling that I got of that whole emptiness and loneliness, to me, was almost like being in a spaceship in outer space, and you wake up and, like, nothing is around you, like, everything is completely gone. And that kind of emptiness that I felt, I related to the sci-fi aspect of, like, being in space, like that. And because, like, the scenes, the shots that we see of these wide shots of just empty London, it was really unsettling for me, and so that's why right away I was like, holy fuck, I feel alone, I feel so sad. I couldn't even imagine being in that position.
I like how 28 Days Later deals with the human interaction as well, whereas some of the other zombie things is like humans are the real enemy, and it's like a really cliche thing at this point. But in 28 Days Later, it was kind of a new idea. At least I think it was. It was one of the first times I had saw that. But what specifically about it is, it doesn't start off that way. The first people he meets, like, when he meets the... I don't know any of the characters' names in this movie.
When he meets the woman and the man...
He meets the woman first, doesn't he? Or
they're together.
Oh, they're together. Yeah. And then so they end up staying, and there's like a little bit of animosity there at first, but then they're okay.
Yeah, because they're like, don't slow us down, or we're gonna leave you for dead. Like I like how it's really cutthroat. Like they care.
Oh, right, because then they find the father and the daughter. That's what came. Yeah. So like that. It's all
about survival. They're like, you slow us down, you're gone.
Yeah,
you're dead to us.
Yeah, but it's not hostile right away. They're not like deliberately horrible people.
No, it's just like the battle to survive, and it's very evident in the way that they talk. Yeah.
And I think the military guys, they seem okay at first, and I don't know if they're all bad. I mean, but yeah, maybe they are.
They were definitely quite rogue. Yeah.
Yeah, but they were. I don't think like every single one of them was a horrible, evil human being, but for the general consensus is they were pretty scummy. Like,
Well, the sad thing about their commanding officer, the major, was the fact that he was essentially the last piece of some kind of government structure. And even he was turning on humans.
Yeah, actually, I guess they all kind of were fucked because that's the main character comes back and like kicks the shit out of him.
Yeah, that's when like he has like this huge character transformation, comes back and saves the women from there's a lot of strong implications of rape, right?
Yeah,
that's when we have that horror of human versus human. So not only do the zombies show up, we have
these scumbags.
Who
present themselves in a way that it's not.
And you're like, oh my god, it's an army base. These are trained soldiers. They got weapons. They got like fortified barracks. Like this is awesome. And then
it just takes this turn where they're scum.
And it's such a sad turn. And already throughout this movie, you're feeling like sad and lonely and hopeless. And then all of a sudden you think, oh, there's salvation. And then nope, just kidding, no salvation. We just want to rape your women, right? So
it does end on a good note, though, right? Like it's one of those movies that ends positively, hence the 28 Days Later, where they just starve, right? The zombies just starve, and then the sequel basically picks up almost right after that, right? And I actually briefly, because this came out in the same time, in the same era of that we're talking about here, I actually really enjoyed the sequel. It was a bit more Hollywood feeling, whereas I feel, I don't know if it actually is, but 28 Days Later feels like an indie movie.
100%. Even the beginning, I thought like that with the style of filming and the shots, I'm like, it almost felt like a documentary in a sense too.
Yeah, it feels very indie, whereas 28 Weeks Later feels more Hollywood. But like, I still really like 28 Weeks Later. It's a pretty good sequel.
Right, but I think the first one is much better than the second one, and specifically because the zombies are actually quite menacing. And when we talked about it before, and I specifically said, because I like George A. Romero zombies, and that's more like the reanimated corpse. But these are actual viruses that affect you. Like living in a pandemic, it becomes a little bit more scary, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that was what I said. Like in a lot of ways, 28 Days Later reshaped the zombie genre, much like Night of the Living Dead did. Decades prior.
Yeah.
Right? Because each time that we deal with a zombie, it's a very different thing horror-wise. And actually, Eli Roth on History of Horror did a really cool episode on that and like how the zombies have evolved over the years, which was a pretty cool episode. I like.
And like with the virus too, it's really cool because in 28 Days Later, you don't have to die to be infected.
Yeah.
The blood drops in the guy's eyes and he turns in less than 20 seconds.
It's human rabies, right?
Yeah. So it's terrifying. And the zombies are not like your reanimated weak corpse. Like they can run, they can get you. So it's they're hunting you. It's fucking terrifying. And like their bloodshot eyes, like when they peer through the window of the army base, and all of a sudden the guys outside, like, and I'm like, holy shit, like that, like that was like a jump scare.
Projectile blood puking, like this fucking nasty.
It's a really cool effect. And a lot of the violent scenes too are like these really close close-up camera movements, so they're cut quick and they're very jerky. So the violence seems like even like really adrenaline. It's really neat how they do that zombie effect.
Yeah, you're right. It does feel it feels very visceral, very brutal.
Yeah, and you don't get that a lot with new zombie stuff because it's just like a long shot of like a bunch of violence going on. You don't get that kind of feel of the action movie.
Yeah, like music video editing almost, where it's just like so quick. Yeah, it's excellent. It's my favorite zombie movie by far. Yeah. And every time I say that, people are like, it's not a zombie movie technically. I'm like, yeah, I get that, but it is.
Because how I remembered it when you brought it up, I was like, oh, I don't remember it being that good. I'm like, because it was really good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Speaking of another movie that I didn't see in like 10 years, you want to talk about number 2?
Oh, number 2. Yeah, this is one that I actually talked about. I mentioned this one briefly on my TikTok. Was that the 1408, which
2007, yeah.
Yeah, which is something. That movie.
That really fucking hits you on a different level. That is like a psychological horror if I've ever fucking seen one.
It's pretty. Yeah, it's heavy duty. With
like my chest is getting heavy just trying to think about it, talk about this movie.
The religious implications. Like last show we talked very briefly about Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
And 1408 in a lot of ways has very strong draws to that, like with lust and gluttony and like is his name Frank? Is his name Frank?
I can't remember.
Yeah, because I was just talking about
his name's John Cusack.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
I was just talking about Frighteners.
Yeah.
Frank Bannister. But anyway, so I got Frank in my head apparently. I don't remember what the fuck his name is. But anyway, John Cusack's character is so like
he embodies a lot of these like deadly sins, right?
Yeah, and this is kind of like his atonement in a lot of ways. But then the grief that he's experiencing from his daughter and like running away on his wife and his pride.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
One of the things that I really liked about this horror story, this psychological horror, is when we see with a lot of other psychological horrors, there's typically some kind of villain. Mm-hmm. But this one, it's not a spirit. It's an evil fucking room, to quote Samuel L. Jackson. And it is. And like I love how like he walks in and he's like, this is it? He's like, oh, no ghosties and ghoulies and like four-legged beasties. And I love how it's just simply a room. There's no you see the ghost in it, and we don't actually know anything about this room and why it's so evil. All we know is about all of its victims that the hotel manager warned. It was like 50 something in total, I think, that were killed there. Yeah. In various ways.
Yeah, 50 something.
But we don't know about the room, and throughout the whole movie, we don't know anything about the room. We just we hear and see his story, his inner demons that he battles with, and we see the other ghosts and how they died. So I really liked how there was no spirit. It was just an evil room that we knew nothing about. It was like another kind of fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah, it very much so. And that's that movie. The haunting is not what's important, and I think this is why the movie affects me in such a way.
Yeah,
it's because it's more about him and like him having to get like his personal battle within himself.
His own inner demons, like, his own turmoil.
Like, it doesn't specify whether he's an atheist at the start of the movie, but you don't know if he always was. It seems to be an implication that he was, he lost his faith because his daughter died, which is a common trope, but he never restores his faith. Usually, there's some kind of element that they find God again or whatever, or they've restored whatever their faith structure is, but that never happens. He always stays in this as
a non-believer. Yeah,
which
absolutely.
I think was an interesting spin on that kind of trope, because usually that trope ends up coming back to them re-fulfilling their faith, and that never happens. Mm-hmm. And depending on the ending, it's actually, because there's two endings that I think there's three, but when reviewing this, we could only find the two. I seem to recall a third one. Maybe I'm just misremembering, but it drastically changes the entire film depending on which ending you see.
Well, I do. I like the one. Should we spoil it? Yeah,
I already gave a spoiler warning. It's honestly spoiler warning.
Well, so the two we saw, I think the one I liked better was the graveyard scene, where all of a sudden, like, you see like the daughter running, daddy, and it almost seems like the daughter of the ghost is like welcoming the ghost of her father, or like the ghost of the daughter is welcoming the ghost. Where he's
actually dead.
Yeah, where he's actually dead, and then all of a sudden, like, Samuel L. Jackson's character, the hotel manager, like, sees John Cusack's burnt ass face in the back of his seat in his car, right? Yeah. So I liked that idea, like the whole graveyard scene with the ghost, like the ghost.
I think that's the theatrical ending, and then the director's cut had the ending where he makes it out and he's back at home with his wife. And it seems like it's a happy ending, and then the recording, it seems like it's like all kind of like in his head, and then the recording actually has the daughter's voice on it, and then the movie ends.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, they both have the daughter's voice, and so, I don't know, they're both, they're both they leave very different feelings in you, like.
Well, I like them both, actually. Yeah. But
well, one's
I like
way more hopeful, and one's just like, yeah.
I like the one where he dies, because, like, everyone else in the room died, so why would he survive?
Yeah.
But the idea of the movie is the fact that he's facing his inner demons. But then when the clock resets and starts to count down again, it's because you're going to relive this hour until you essentially kill yourself. That's what the room's trying to force him to do, right? So, again, like, that whole idea that fear gestates in the mind, right? That you're facing your inner demons, and, like, the true battle comes from within yourself, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it hit us on such a hard level, because, like, the psychological aspect of facing your inner fears and having them thrown at you constantly for an hour, and then once you feel like you've beaten them, the clock resets and you gotta face them again, and it's fucking terrifying, man. Like, I got goosebumps just thinking about it.
The hardest demons you'll ever face are your own. Like, your own problems, your own traumas, and never, it's not the ghost, and, like, again, this is kind of like a trope thing, but it's not the ghost in the closet, it's not the serial killer down the street, it's what's in you. That is the hardest and scariest thing to ever try to overcome. And not even,
and you're right, and not even about the idea of just facing your inner demons, but coming to terms with them, the idea of forgiveness, right? Like, he knows he was a shitty father, he feels like he was a shitty father, and he's trying to...
shitty husband.
And a shitty husband. And he, like, the idea of forgiving yourself to move forward, but forgiveness is easier said than done, especially when you're trying to forgive yourself, trying to move forward, right?
It also implies he's a shitty son, too, with the scene with his father, and then you just put him in a home instead of looking after him. And So, there's some implications that he's and again, the whole, it's not necessarily, it's not an implication that he is a selfish man. He is a selfish man.
Yeah.
But there's implications to show the kind of man he was. It doesn't directly say in a lot of times, but you get the idea that he's lustful, he's gluttonous, he's
with
prideful,
alcohol,
you know, so
he's
there's
arrogant.
a lot of, and, other people have talked about it in a lot more depth, and I could honestly talk about the actual direct correlations for hours about this film and the direct references to Dante's Inferno.
Well, you should mention a few.
Comedy. Well,
like maybe some of the obvious ones, maybe?
Well, like Olin being Virgil is one of the big ones. The symbolism of lust, having to, like, walk along the edge of the building, much like Dante did in the Divine Comedy into the next realm, which was symbolic of lust. Dealing with wrath and pride and gluttony, and even the whole scene where it freezes over in the room, which treachery, right? And then there's the whole, that treacherous is the whole thing where the ghost version of him tricks his wife into coming into the room. Yeah. So there's a lot of, and I'm just I'm kind of going through it a little quickly.
Even the heat in the room too, right?
Yeah.
It was constantly sweating. It was constantly hot.
Yeah. So there's a lot of references to the Divine Comedy throughout it. Even the door imagery, the white rooms at the end of the movie when he thinks he's home in the apartment. A lot of, like, the whole Paradiso elements, and then the water. The water is very symbolic in the movie, of constant references to, like, traversal. And things like that. You know, almost like Charon, Philagathon, all the different areas in the comedy.
Yeah, it was honestly, and we mentioned this too when we were watching it, because we had to watch it together, because you pointed out a few things to me that I missed, and you explained to me. I was like, "Fuck, man, like, that's deep." But it's the idea that this story, like, everything that happens in this movie, is done on purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything is completely intentional.
Yeah.
Right? So it's based on a short story by Stephen King, and admittedly, I've never read it.
Neither have I.
But the director, everything he does in this screen adaptation is completely intentional.
Yeah. It has there's no shot in the movie that does not have a specific purpose. To either promote his self-indulgence, to either show his lustfulness, his gluttony, his pride, or to be some other allegory in the film. But there is quite a bit. Not a single scene is wasted, basically.
Yeah. And I love that about the movie. And to just kind of speak abstractly quickly before we would move on, I like how the movie it's not really a slow burn, but it's not really one of those adrenaline junkie movies either. It's kind of like somewhere in that sweet spot.
It kind of jumps around. Like, some parts I feel like, holy fuck, like, really intense, and it's quiet. And
so that's why I found the movie particularly entertaining and fun. Like, it's a horror movie, and it's fucking with you psychologically. But it's I couldn't look away from the movie because of that constant, like, what's going to happen next? I don't fucking know. Just keep watching, right?
And it sticks with you. Like, I think about this movie all the time. Like, it's a movie that I constantly reference back to and other things, and it's a movie that it's constantly on my mind. I never really stop thinking about this one, which is actually true about
our next film.
Top one on this, which some people might push back that it's not a horror movie, but I would tell you you're wrong. Because this movie...
Out of the 5, I would say this movie, to this day, is one of the only movies that can really make me feel creeped out and unsettled and scared. And I don't scare easy, neither do you. Yeah. And even when we were kids, it's had the same effect on us as kids and right into adults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about it, we're going to tell you what it is.
We just want to build a suspense.
Is even when we were preparing for this episode, we were just talking about like our notes and our comparisons. We're both getting goosebumps, like standing hair straight on end.
Yeah.
Just talking about this
movie.
We're
Italian, we're hairy, so when that stuff, when it stands up, it's noticeable.
It's just like a forest. So, yeah.
Go ahead, you got the honors. You say it. You say it.
So, some people say it's not a horror movie. I disagree, and it is the Mothman Prophecies.
The Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere.
Yeah.
2002.
Yeah, 2002.
2002.
We watched this one. I think we watched pretty much as soon as it was available. I remember Mom picking this one up.
Yeah, and you know what? Mama is like all over these horror movies. Yeah. We owe her a lot for like introducing us to a lot of these things.
She's not into. She doesn't like hardcore gore movies, but like stuff like this.
But yeah,
which is scarier. Like this movie fucked me up for life. Like
I watched a lot of those like cheesy kind of urban legend movies, right? So even when you think of right away the Mothman Prophecies is one of those cheesy urban legends, but it actually adapts so well to this screenplay.
It does.
And I think some people have argued that there's some cheesy aspects of it, and that may or may be true, especially when you're talking about it being like the Mothman. It doesn't actually have like any kind of real physical form that we ever see, right? But it's one of those urban legends that's actually, I think, that's done really well. It shouldn't turn you off of the film if you haven't seen it.
The creature doesn't matter. The creature doesn't matter. It really even though the movie is centered around it, you never see it really. Mm-hmm. It's a presence that's there, and it's not even an evil force. It's not malevolent. How the fuck do you say that word? Malevolent. Malevolent.
Yeah.
I can't talk for shit. I write, I don't speak.
Why are we doing a podcast?
Yeah, fuck, I don't know, because I slow and painful torture, I guess. But yeah, like, it's not an evil spirit per se. Fuck off. It's not an evil spirit. It just gives information, and people go, and this for me,
and tragic information.
Yeah, and they go crazy trying to figure it out. But the thing about this movie in that sense is that, and I say it's not necessarily a cosmic horror, but that has got strong cosmic horror elements. This kind of knowing just enough to drive you fucking crazy.
Yeah.
It's a very Lovecraft thing.
And that, I love that, because this is my idea of the movie. The universe is revealing to you something that is beyond your understanding. Very Lovecraftian. How do you cope with that?
Yeah.
Well, fuck, you just have to. Like, you can't really respond to it. Like, there's a tragedy that's going to happen, but you can't actually, you can't stop it. You can't prevent it. It's not even the idea of fate. It's just the idea that it's unknown. There's nothing you can do because it just is, man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to explain it. I got it because we're doing a podcast. I should articulate, but fuck.
And like the movie is, and again, why it affects me so much is not just. It's just fucking eerie. Like, you can't really classify it as anything other than eerie.
And like the raw loneliness.
The grief specifically. This movie is very much about overcoming grief, and we'll get to that in a minute because that's kind of like a key point to the movie. But just the general feeling is so eerie and unsettling. Just the atmosphere, how it does, even the camera work, the red light imagery that it uses as like the symbols of the foreshadowing of the Mothman's eyes, the Mothman's like his all they talk about is the eyes. That's like really the only description they give.
And all you see is like kind of like a shadow that implies it's a winged creature, but it's very obscure.
And like you were saying about it being secondhand knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you never even the character John Klein, Richard Gere, you never see the Mothman, and he never sees the Mothman. Everything is secondhand knowledge. It's told through another's experience, how they're recalling their own personal experience with this. Not like how, hey, like, this is what we saw, and it's different. Everyone has their different experience, and that's what makes it so menacing too. Yeah. Everyone's recounting to this character and to the audience their own personal way of experiencing this Indrid Cold, this Mothman. And it's fucking creepy. And like the dream way that they tell it. It does it. And the choice of like the weird kind of mechanical score that it uses too. Dude, like the fucking sound, random one piano key and that's it.
It's so. The movie's hard to talk about. Like I can feel them still. Like
you feel the fuzzies going.
Yeah, the movie creeps me out, dude. Like even as an adult, like I'm fucking 32 years old, and I just watched it again for this podcast, and like I feel fucking unsettled watching it. Like the movie. And I watched it alone too because Steph was.
Yeah, me too. I watched like at 2 a.m. just a couple nights ago because I just couldn't sleep. So I was like, let's go watch the Mothman Prophecies again. And I was like. Big mistake. Because the image of those red eyes and like that black obscure shadow with the charcoal drawing, I'm like, no, don't look around. I don't want to see it. Where is it? No, don't look. Where is it? And I'm like in my dark place. Am I alone? I'm home alone. I'm like, oh God, where are the, like, you don't want to look in the darkness. Because those red eyes, because everything in the movie has that very dark setting, like most horror films do. But then there's that huge contrast of those bright red eyes. Just like that bright red tree in The Ring, right? They always do that kind of contrast. Yeah. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, it has...
I'm just mumbling.
The significance of it, too, you always see... there's emphasis on red stoplights, brake lights on cars.
The bridge lights,
the bridge lights, the Y imagery as well, which was always, like, symbolic of, like, his foot, I think.
No, I think it was actually his body, like the.
Oh, it's his body.
Yeah, like the.
Yeah. Okay.
The stem and then his wings, right?
Okay.
The Y,
yeah. So that imagery as well, and like you'll see a string of like Christmas lights, but the red ones are the ones that are like larger, kind of more glowy than the other ones. Like, there's a lot of that kind of imagery, which. It's like hits you on like a subliminal level, and then when it starts happening, it makes it so much worse. And I think like we were talking earlier about like the way the camera moves.
Oh, I love the camera movement.
Because a lot of times it does it to make it seem like you're seeing things from the Mothman's perspective. Like, specifically the scene where the old lady's looking out the window, and it, like, draws out and, like, off.
It looks like he flies away.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're the Mothman on the
and it even does, like a swooshy kind of sound. It's not corny. The way it's hard to describe the way they do it.
And even on the one scene where Richard Gere's character is sitting on the bench, and, like, the camera does, like, a weird, like, flying, creepy motion towards him, and he looks behind him, like your sixth sense telling you, like, look over your shoulder. There's something watching you. Yeah. And he looks, and then the camera's just still. And then he looks again, or like he looks away, and the camera moves like it's the moth, right? It gets really, really creepy with those sudden jerking movements.
And that kind of comes back to the whole, like, a higher being, Lovecraftian style, like, way of things, right?
Yeah.
Like, this elder power that we can't understand. That in the cases of like Lovecraft, they're just chaos and evil, but in this, it's not the case, which I think actually makes it creepier because you can't understand it, but it's not necessarily evil.
Right, exactly. And the idea that this movie really pushes home is the fact that not everything can be solved.
No.
And not everything should be solved, because the whole idea of this movie is he's trying to relate it back to his dead wife. He's lonely, he's missing her, he's grieving her. It's 2 years later, right? And his connection through the Mothman is because of his wife, or his connection to the Mothman, right? Because he's experienced it as some kind of trauma. And I just love the idea that he wants to solve this. He's trying to stop these tragedies that these other people have dreamt about and have told him. And he can't, because it's the fear of the unknown. Again, he doesn't know. And there's just, things can't always be solved. And when you're knowing that tragedy is going to happen and you can't fucking do anything about it.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
It's the curse of knowledge, basically, right?
Yeah.
I talking about that curse of knowledge, I think that the main character that suffers the most from that is Gordon, played by William Patton.
Bill Paxton. Oh,
no,
yeah.
not Bill Paxton. I think it's William Patton.
Yeah, okay. The guy, yeah.
Yeah, the farmer dude. Or, I don't know if he's a farmer, but he looks like a farmer dude.
He lives in not a trailer, sorry. But he lives in like a White House in the country with a shotgun.
Yeah.
He's a pretty cool guy.
I mean, that's almost me. I don't have a shotgun, but... But anyway, yeah, so like his role and his acting really sells how creeped out he is by this creature, and like the way it approaches him, this the Indrid Cold, which is never. I don't think they ever gender identify it. I don't. Does he say he? I don't think he does.
No.
Its voice is so like metallic and synthetic that you can't really identify.
It's like mechanical, distorted.
And it goes by Indrid Cold, which is such a generic, or not generic, but such a non-identifying name.
Well, it's like a neutral name.
Yeah.
It could be feminine or masculine, really. Yeah.
So I think just that in itself, and for me, like this scene, I think I was telling you about this, it's a scene that fucks me up so bad, and it's such a simple scene. Just before he dies, Gordon's character freezes to death. He is on the bridge talking to Klein, Richard Gere's character. Yeah, and when he just looks at him and he asks him, "When's the last time you were happy?" And like that scene is so heavy. And we go to, and that's kind of where it jumps away from the Mothman solving thing, back to Klein's. His wife's death and his grief. Like you said, we were going to come back to that. Is that the grief? The movie is about him conquering that grief in a lot of ways. It's kind of two major themes. The idea of kind of accepting fate-ish, I guess, and like the forbidden knowledge and that. And then the other major theme is grief and overcoming it. Right. Especially
because that scene where he's waiting for his wife to call him, because Indrid Cold, the Mothman, presumably says, this time, I think noon on whatever day, Mary will call you. Mary's his dead wife.
Yeah.
And just before he gets the phone call, the officer that he's befriended in Pleasantville, West Virginia, or is it Point Pleasant?
Point Pleasant, yeah. And they're kind of developing a romantic relationship, kind of. It's it seems like that's the case.
Yeah, they have really good chemistry.
Yeah.
Definitely. And like right away, she's inclined to believe him too. She doesn't think he's some villain that's like popping up at this guy's house a third night in a row, right? So she's a very open-minded cop, which is typically pretty
uncommon for a small town.
Yeah, I'm like trying to stay polite about it. Yeah, that's not okay. Anyways, so she calls him instead. He's waiting for Mary, his dead wife, to call, but the cop calls him instead, the sergeant, and she's trying to tell him, like, look, you shouldn't be alone right now. Come here. And the idea of the phone call, you read between the lines, it's saying, like, you need to let go of this trauma. You have to, you're grieving, and that's okay, but you have to move on and let go.
100%.
And that scene, that phone call scene, the acting is also phenomenal. Like, really, even now, I get goosebumps because it's so emotional for me.
Yeah.
Because there's so many, personally, this is why we connected with this film so much. It's because we've been through our traumas, and like, sure, everyone has, right? And it's the idea of being able to not only, like, accept it, but being able to move on from it.
Yeah.
And can you imagine, like, what he's been through, like losing a loved one, right? Like it's not hard. It's so hard. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to just say, oh yeah, like okay, sure, let me just like get over it, like you know.
Yeah.
So that phone call is quite pivotal, and that's why I really like the ending of this movie, because the reason why he decides to not answer the phone when his wife calls right after that phone call. It's noon and she's calling. He knows it's her and he rips the phone out of the wall and refuses to answer it. It's because he's decided to move on.
Yeah.
Right?
And he drives back or flies back to Point Pleasant to go spend Christmas. I can't even fucking talk. To go spend Christmas with Connie. I think her name's Connie.
Yeah, the cop.
Yeah, so he goes to spend Christmas with her, and then the movie jumps back to, oh yeah, by the way, you're still watching the Mothman Prophecy.
Yeah.
And the prophecy hasn't happened yet, and so then it does, and then you see this horrible tragedy happen with all these people drowning in the river, the bridge collapsing, and then even as it's happening, him trying to prevent it. Still, once he clues in, like the moment that and then it does that like pan where, because he's convinced that the chemical plant's gonna blow.
Yeah, because it's on the same lake.
Yeah. And then it just does this pan from like once he realizes what's happening, it does this shot like almost like his brain. It shows the plan, and then it zooms way down the river to the bridge, and it's kind of like that symbol of his brain realizing, oh fuck, I've been thinking about the wrong thing this whole time, and this is where it's going to happen. And then he immediately starts trying to save people, and it's still too late.
And it's crazy because there were premonitions about it. About that
because she had the dream,
and he was still getting the tragedy wrong because it's the fear of the unknowing. Like, you don't actually know. It's a tragedy that you're told, but you don't actually know when and where it's going to happen, how to prevent it, what exactly it's going to look like. Like you said, he thought it was going to be at that chemical plant, and it happened on the bridge instead, and then he didn't realize it until the moment it fucking happened, and then you're in it. You can't get out of it.
And, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, the scene of the bridge fucking collapsing, like watching the wires just break. I'm like, holy, like, can you imagine being on a bridge when that's happening?
Yeah.
Like,
it's like a less gory version of Ghost Ship.
Yeah.
When the fucking cable lets go and cuts everybody on the deck in half.
Yeah.
It's like the one thing everyone remembers from Ghost Ship.
Yeah.
It's like
the very beginning of the movie.
So do you remember Ghost Ship? I remember everyone getting cut in half. Like that's like pretty much it. But anyway.
But it's a very scary scene.
It's the way it's done is so tension. And the thing about it too is that it calls back directly to an earlier scene where Connie is describing a dream that she had. And for me, and we talked a little bit about this scene is what we each have our scene in the movie that really fucks us up mentally. This is the scene that does it for me because I have an irrational fear of dreaming. We've talked about this before, and that's where I get a lot of the inspiration for my work, my short stories and my novels. Is this fear of dreaming. Because in my dreams, I'm completely out of control, right? And I have recurring dreams and things like that, and that idea scares the shit out of me, especially the kind of things that I dream about. And so her describing this dream that she's having that is her drowning, surrounded by presents, and the whole wake up number 37 type of thing.
So
the way she talks about it is dreamy in its own sense. And you see, like, she's crying because it's affecting her. It's, like, fucked her up. And when I think back on, like, we were talking yesterday, even before the show, about about dreams that we've had. And, like, this, I get this, I wasn't crying, but, like, the same kind of level of effect is just, you feel, it's so hard to describe.
And you're disturbed by it.
Like, it shakes you to your core.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, dreams are terrifying. Like, just the whole concept of sleeping is very terrifying.
And that's actually how a lot of these premonitions and visions come through, like we mentioned before. It's through that kind of dreamscape feeling, right? And it gives it that very lucid, realistic, but almost disconnected feeling.
Yeah.
And it's trippy in that sense, right? Because like I had mentioned before, Richard Gere's character never experiences any of this. Everything is secondhand information. But the way it's delivered, wake up number 37, like even just the way she says it, like really creeps me out.
Yeah, I don't know. And then once she realizes the dream is happening, and it's just, it adds to this constant theme of this movie that, or not theme, but like feeling, really. The movie just feels fucking cold. Like, I don't know how to describe it, like, other than it just, or how to explain it.
Well, because even the guy's name is Indrid Cold, and you see a lot of like cold air emitted when
Gordon
they're
freezes,
warm air when they're breathing.
Yeah, Gordon freezes to death.
Yeah,
they're in the lake. I get that it's wintertime, but it feels even colder than that. Like,
well,
I don't
even
know.
Richard Gere's always like kind of bundling up in his coat on camera. You always see him kind of doing this.
Yeah. Like, yes, it's wintertime, but the movie makes it seem even colder still. Like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's just, I feel cold watching the movie. Yeah.
Oh man, I feel a lot of things on
Well, yeah, I feel a lot of things too. Yeah, it's something. This is a movie that no matter how many times I watch it, I feel fucked up from it.
And like, honestly, if you guys haven't seen it because you're deterred for whichever reasons, perhaps like because it's an urban legend or you think that it just looks cheesy, I say on it, just give it a try. And if you hate it, totally cool. That's all right.
Yeah,
like, give it a try, man. Like, and I want to know what people think on it.
Yeah, so do I, because this is one of those movies that I don't hear a lot of people talk about.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have seen it. So I'm very curious about feedback on this movie, and because especially if you like psychological horror, because this movie is psychological in a different way. 1408 is more about like the inner battle, but Mothman is
about the outside battle that you have no control over.
It's just,
it's the looming fear of the unknown, and I, like one of the lines in the movie that I really like when he's talking to the scholar in DC and he's trying to figure out what the fuck's going on, and the guy just looks at him. He's like, well, these beings, these Mothmen, explaining, they can't explain what they are to you because it would be like you trying to explain your reasoning and being to a cockroach. I'm like, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, that's an allegory that's used in other films as well. But I love that. Sorry, not allegory, metaphor. That metaphor is used in other, and I love that. The other thing that he says to him is, "We're not allowed to know." When he asks about what they are or what they do, and then he just says, "We're not allowed to know," and it's just. That in itself is just like, okay, and that feels very Lovecraftian, even though it's not a cosmic horror.
And like I said before, like the universe has these interdimensional beings that are there, and we somewhat, I guess, know exist, and they impact our lives in some ways, and we don't know why they exist or what the purpose of them are. They're just there. They just are. Yeah,
exactly. It's just a force of nature.
Yeah, and I think. That is a really like drop the mic moment. We should end it there. Okay, cut. Bye. Start going. Finish your thought.
Yeah, no. Just the last thing I want to say is that the movie ends on like a double-edged sword, right? Because he gets over his grief essentially and tries to move on, but then this tragedy still happens, and the movie just kind of drops it right there, just leaves it like. And you
the ending's sad.
Yeah, it feels sad and like kind of it's complete, but you feel empty even though it's completed. Like it's so it comes full circle, but it still feels empty.
Because I guess like his journey is completed of moving on, of getting over his trauma, but the incompleteness comes from the Mothman. Like he never solved the case. He never figured out shit about this Mothman. Yeah. It's completely incomplete. You're right.
Yeah. And you're left not knowing. And again, it's cosmic elements there, which I totally appreciate.
Yeah. I think I want to know people's top 5 if they can pick some.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Sorry.
No,
let us know what yours are.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think of ours too.
Yeah. Well, what movies that and try to follow the rules too. Not movies that you just think are good, but movies that affected you and why and how they affected you. Unless it's like super personal, but like because I know like Martyrs is from this time frame, and Martyrs fucked up a lot of people. So there's a lot of films out there in this time frame. It'd be kind of cool to hear feedback on that.
Yeah, comment below, guys. We'd love to engage.
Yeah,
it's so great to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, we read and answer every comment. We don't have a lot right now, but
we really enjoy going through.
Yeah, and we look forward to it too. It's like our way of engaging with you guys.
Yeah.
So that does. I think that's pretty much it for.
Yeah, guys, thanks for joining in for another episode of the GUADCAST.
Yeah.
We're hoping to keep doing this. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you think too, and keep engaging with us. We love the support.
Yeah. We appreciate every ounce, every like, every comment, every share that we get. It means a lot to us. Also, I think if you have ideas for future episodes, things you'd like us to talk about,
please
we would love suggestions, because we just love coming up with these strategies to tackle these topics.
And there's so much to talk about with horror, so just let us know the ideas. We'd love to.
We can talk about this shit for days. There'll never be enough to talk about, too much to talk about. We'll have tons.
Too much to talk about.
Yeah, about. Yeah, so also you can check us out on Slasher. I'm on there as PlaidPagan.
I'm on there as Moonwitch. Yeah. And we always connect each other with a lot of our posts anyways. So.
Yeah, so you'll see us shouting each other back and forth.
Yeah, like add us as friends if you want. We would love to engage.
Yeah, we're pretty active on Slasher. We're big fans of that platform. Yeah. And we're both on there at least daily, if nothing else. Yeah, so that's all we got. We're discussing what the next episode is going to be. We think it's going to be something a little less heavy. We've kind of done 2 heavy episodes in a row.
Yeah, we thought this one would be kind of like fun and fluffy, and we're like, oh my god, why am I feeling so emotional doing this episode?
Yeah, so I think, do we want to announce the next episode is? Or
no.
Okay, sorry.
It's not like another like drum roll suspense. It's just because I'm still conflicted on trying to sort out my ideas.
Oh, okay, because we got a couple.
You're like, great.
Yeah, we've got a couple of ideas that we want to that'll be a little bit lighthearted.
Yeah.
Something a little more fun.
And then we'll just put like our edgy dark twist on it, of course, right?
Yeah. Maybe a bit more joking, because this one, like Becky was just saying, this episode is harder to do jokes with because we're talking about how these movies fucked us up mentally.
Yeah, we're like, I'm so emotional. Like, should I just make a joke at my own expense? Yes, but I'm just too emotional to think of one.
Self-depreciation.
Yeah. All right, guys, well, stay safe and engage with us. We want to hear from you, and thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, we appreciate every ounce, and you guys be good to each other and stay safe, and we'll catch you next time. Is that your bitch?
Yes. So you were just saying that the gore was fucking shit CGI. I'm gonna get me some water first. Got what, the whistle?
Gotta wet my whistle.
What my hair look like Samara. Finish the podcast. Is some hairy little black girl? That sounds dirty. Sorry, anyways. We'll cut that out. In one. Shit yourself.
Ass trumpet.
Ass trumpet.
Hail Satan! And have a lovely day.
I always do. Oh, dude, that's rancid. Holy shit. I can't even think of what I want to say next, dude.
Zucchini pasta.
Oh my god.
That's right. Those are on brand, don't they? That's some magic.
Oh, man, that's potent.
Oh, my eyes are watering.
Is that onion?
Ketchup.
Yeah, now that I think about it, the plaid's a little fucked up.
You're a little fucked up. Because this movie is psychological in a different way. Whereas like 13 for fuck's sake.
13 goes?
1408. Fuck my life. 1408 is.
Do you want to cut it and we can redo it?
That's fine. I mean, now I have to. Like, yo, we even got Pennywise over here.
Guest star hanging out.
We got Cthulhu right here, little fuzzy fucker. And then we got Precious down there, Cerberus.
And of course we have the guest of honor, Lucifer.
How's it look now? Does it look like a cock sandwich with extra mayo?
It's hard to say with your ugly mug and